Enlightenment in the Buddha's teaching is not a vague state or a mystical experience beyond reach, but a living truth, simple and profound. In the ancient scriptures, he defined nibbana as the complete destruction of greed, hatred, and delusion. The word complete destruction matters deeply, for it is not suppression or temporary control, but the uprooting of the very roots that nourish suffering. Imagine a gardener. If he only cuts the weeds on the surface, they will grow back again. But if he patiently digs out the roots, the soil becomes pure. In the same way, enlightenment is when the mind is freed from the roots of suffering, no longer carried away in the endless cycle of becoming. Greed is the thirst to grasp and accumulate. Hatred is the fire that burns the heart. And delusion is the fog that clouds the truth. These three poisons form an invisible chain binding human beings to suffering. When the Buddha spoke of nibbana, he did not point to a distant place, but to the possibility of cleansing these roots within the mind itself. The reality of awakening is not about adding something new, but about releasing, letting go, and arriving at a deep lightness. When the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion are extinguished, one no longer has to struggle or hide, but lives in a clarity and freedom never known before. It is a state no longer bound by familiar impulses, a stillness not granted from outside, but arising from the deep insight of the mind itself. Enlightenment, therefore, is not an escape from the world, but a clear seeing of the world as it truly is, no longer distorted by illusion. This is why the Buddha called awakening the ending of suffering at its very root, an unshakable liberation, and the greatest human potential one can realize. The path to realizing not self, as the Buddha taught, is not a philosophy to be debated, but a reality to be seen through direct inner experience. He instructed us to carefully observe the five aggregates: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, the five elements that make up what we usually call me. Form is the body and all physical sensations. Feeling is the ongoing experience of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral tones. Perception is how the mind recognizes and labels phenomena. Mental formations are the full range of reactions, habits, intentions, and emotions. And consciousness is the continuous stream of awareness that knows all these. Looking deeply into each aggregate, we discover a simple truth often obscured. Everything is impermanent. Nothing stays the same, even for a moment. The body changes moment by moment. Feelings pass like clouds. Thoughts arise and vanish like echoes, and consciousness itself is only a ceaseless flow. Because they are impermanent, they cannot provide lasting satisfaction. Any joy fades away, any pain transforms, and nothing remains fixed to hold on to.
Seeing this with clarity, we realize that within this entire process, there is no unchanging self. Instead of a fixed identity, there is only the temporary interplay of these 5 streams. Recognizing this undermines delusion at its root, and greed and hatred naturally lose their force, for there is no longer a separate self to protect or gratify. From this insight, the mind becomes lighter, freer, and takes steady steps upon the open path of awakening.
When the Buddha spoke of the result of awakening, he did not describe a distant, mystical state, but a liberation that can be directly recognized in the mind of one who has walked the full path. The scriptures call it asavakkhaya, the complete destruction of the mental defilements, the subtle streams of corruption flowing underground in consciousness cut off entirely. This is not merely the temporary calming of unwholesome habits, but their total eradication, like a rope severed so completely it can never be tied again. At that point, the 10 fetters, the invisible chains binding beings to the cycle of birth and death, are also broken. These include identity view, the mistaken belief in a fixed self, doubt in the path, attachment to rituals and forms, sensual craving, ill will that clouds the heart, craving for refined realms of existence, craving for formless absorption, conceit comparing oneself to others, restlessness, and finally ignorance, the root of all. When these fetters fall away, the mind is no longer bound by any chain. The awakened one no longer chases illusions for happiness, nor is led astray by the darkness of ignorance. They live in the world but are not bound by it, like the lotus growing in the mud yet remaining pure. This is not emptiness in the sense of meaninglessness, but a complete freedom, free from fear, free from doubt, free from the ties of craving and hatred. This is the most noble result of awakening, an enduring peace nothing can shatter, and a living testimony to the liberating potential within every human being.
In the scriptures, the Buddha often used vivid metaphors to help people grasp the meaning of awakening, and one of the most powerful is that of the heavy backpack. Imagine carrying a backpack on your back from birth, so heavy that over time you forget its presence. Day after day, you go on living, learning to endure its weight until it becomes a familiar part of existence. But one day, you set the backpack down. Suddenly, your whole body feels light. Your steps are free. You can run, you can leap, you can move in ways you never thought possible. The difference lies not in gaining some new power, but in the burden being lifted away. Awakening is like this. It does not bestow strange powers or supernatural abilities, but simply removes the invisible weight that greed, hatred, and delusion have pressed upon the heart for countless lifetimes. When that burden falls, we discover that lightness, peace, and freedom were always present, merely hidden beneath layers of clinging and illusion. Enlightenment is therefore not about becoming someone else, but about returning to the clarity already inherent within. It is like the clear sky revealed when the clouds pass, or the still water when the wind subsides. True liberation does not consist in acquiring something more, but in the ultimate act of letting go, to see that the mind is already capable of freedom, already luminous, already whole from the very beginning.
In the scriptures, the Buddha often used vivid metaphors to help people grasp the meaning of awakening. And one of the most powerful is that of the heavy backpack. Imagine carrying a backpack on your back from birth, so heavy that over time you forget its presence. Day after day you go on living, learning to endure its weight, until it becomes a familiar part of existence. But one day, you set the backpack down. Suddenly, your whole body feels light. Your steps are free, you can run, you can leap, you can move in ways you never thought possible. The difference lies not in gaining some new power, but in the burden being lifted away. Awakening is like this. It does not bestow strange powers or supernatural abilities, but simply removes the invisible weight that greed, hatred, and delusion have pressed upon the heart for countless lifetimes. When that burden falls, we discover that lightness, peace, and freedom are always present, merely hidden beneath layers of clinging and illusion. Enlightenment is therefore not about becoming someone else, but about returning to the clarity already inherent within. It is like the clear sky revealed when the clouds pass, or the still water when the wind subsides. True liberation does not consist in acquiring something more, but in the ultimate act of letting go, to see that the mind is already capable of freedom, already luminous, already whole from the very beginning.
In the 20th century, the psychologist Abraham Maslow became famous for his hierarchy of needs, a model showing human growth through levels ranging from survival and safety to love, esteem, and finally self-actualization, the fulfillment of one's deepest potential. For decades, this highest stage was considered the pinnacle of human possibility. Yet, toward the end of his life, Maslow realized there was a step beyond self-actualization. He called it self-transcendence, a state in which the individual no longer focuses on perfecting the self, but expands consciousness to connect with something greater than the personal ego. At this level, the goal is not to affirm the self, but to go beyond it, to feel unity and interconnection with the whole of life. This was a remarkable discovery because it aligns so naturally with the Buddha's teaching on not self. More than 2,000 years earlier, the Buddha had pointed out that suffering arises from clinging to a fixed self, while true freedom comes from realizing that this self is but an illusion formed by countless conditions. Maslow, through the lens of Western psychology, touched upon a truth the Buddha had taught through meditation and direct insight. This meeting point reveals the timeless wisdom of the Dharma and creates a bridge between East and West. Enlightenment is not a denial of humanity, but an expansion beyond the narrow boundaries of the ego, to live with compassion, wisdom, and a deep sense of connection to the universe.
The path to awakening is not a hidden mystery reserved for a select few, but a clear roadmap the Buddha offered to all. It is the noble eightfold path, 8 factors woven together as a single current, carrying the practitioner from the darkness of ignorance to the light of wisdom. The first 3 belong to wisdom. Right view and right intention allow us to see the 4 noble truths clearly, to recognize suffering, its origin, its cessation, and the path leading to its end. With this understanding, thought is inclined toward renunciation, goodwill, and non-harming. The next 3 belong to ethical conduct, right speech, right action, and right livelihood. These form the moral foundation of a pure life, free from harm to oneself and others, creating fertile ground for liberation to grow. The last 3 belong to concentration, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Right effort is the steady commitment to cultivate wholesome states and abandon unwholesome ones. Right mindfulness is the capacity to remain awake in each moment, seeing body, feelings, mind, and phenomena as they are, without judgment or identification. Right concentration is the deep unification of mind, leading to meditative absorption, where the heart becomes calm, clear, and resilient. Alongside this, the Buddha taught 2 essential practices: samatha, or calm abiding, which steadies the mind like a still lake, and vipassana, or insight, which penetrates the impermanent, unsatisfactory, and selfless nature of all phenomena. When calm and insight work together, liberating wisdom gradually shines forth, and the chains of ignorance, craving, and aversion are loosened step by step until the mind is truly free.
Awakening does not mean abandoning the world or retreating into distant solitude, but a complete transformation in how one lives amidst ordinary life. After his enlightenment, the Buddha did not choose seclusion, but spent over 40 years traveling and teaching the path of liberation. This shows that awakening is not apart from life, but makes life full and meaningful. The awakened one lives in the world without being bound by it, like a lotus blooming in the mud yet remaining pure. Their actions are no longer driven by greed, hatred, or delusion, but are rooted in compassion and wisdom. In daily life, awakening naturally manifests through the 4 immeasurable states: loving kindness, the open-hearted wish for all beings to be happy; compassion, the deep empathy for suffering and the wish to relieve it; sympathetic joy, the genuine happiness in the well-being of others; and equanimity, the balance that transcends partiality and attachment. These qualities are not forced disciplines, but the natural fruit of a liberated mind. Thus, the awakened person does not live indifferently, but lives fully, neither avoiding suffering nor being swept away by it. They act with clarity, unconditional love, and an unshakable peace. Awakening in everyday life means bringing wisdom and compassion into each word and deed, so that every moment of existence becomes an opportunity to nourish peace and happiness for oneself and for all beings.
The highest meaning of awakening does not end with personal liberation, but unfolds as a radiant light of wisdom and compassion that extends to all beings. When one is freed from the chains of greed, hatred, and delusion, the mind opens as vast as the sky. Compassion then ceases to be confined to family, friends, or a small circle, and becomes a boundless current flowing toward all living creatures. Awakening is therefore not a private reward for the practitioner, but a gift to the world. For their very presence brings peace, trust, and inspiration to those who encounter them. The awakened one becomes a lamp that illumines the path, not through power or command, but through the serenity, wisdom, and compassion radiating from each gesture, glance, and smile. It is a guidance that is silent yet profound, helping others to recognize the liberating potential within themselves. The Buddha once said that he was only a guide, and whether people walk the path or not depends on them. Yet without the light of awakening to reveal the way, the world would remain lost. Thus, the supreme meaning of awakening is the creation of an endless stream of wisdom and love, so that humanity not only finds freedom for the individual, but together nurtures a world of understanding, harmony, and liberation. This is the greatest potential of human beings, a potential that transcends the narrow self to touch the vastness of boundless compassion and undying wisdom.
The essence of not-self and emptiness can be understood through a familiar image. A human being is like a river. The river is always flowing, its waters never still, changing at every moment. Yet we give it a fixed name, like the Mississippi or the Ganges, and imagine it as an unchanging entity. In reality, it is nothing more than the coming together of countless drops, streams, and currents in ceaseless transformation. Human beings are the same. What we call I is in fact only the combination of body, sensations, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, all of which are constantly changing. When we fail to see this, we cling to an imagined self, and from this clinging arise countless sufferings, fear of loss, anger at insult, anxiety at lack of recognition. But when we look deeply and realize there is no fixed self, only a living process, clinging naturally dissolves, and with it the suffering tied to the idea of self. Not self does not mean denying our presence, but seeing that this presence is ever new, ever moving, never a separate entity. Emptiness, likewise,
does not mean nothingness, but the truth that all phenomena lack an inherent nature of their own and exist only through interdependence. When we realize emptiness, we see there is nothing to grasp and nothing that can truly be lost. From this insight, the mind opens wide, free, and filled with compassion, no longer confined within the narrow shell of a separate self.
The practical meaning of emptiness lies in the assurance it gives that no situation or suffering is permanent. When we see that all things arise from conditions and cease when conditions change, we understand that nothing exists in a fixed state. Today's sorrow will pass, anger will subside, and even the deepest wounds of the heart can be healed. This is not mere consolation, but a truth of reality. Just as the sky is always shifting with clouds and winds, human life is always opening to new possibilities, never locked into a hopeless conclusion. Emptiness, therefore, brings hope, not blind hope, but confidence rooted in the understanding that everything can be transformed. When we realize that phenomena are empty of inherent essence, we see that no bad habit is destiny, no inner wound is eternally bound to us. As conditions change, so do outcomes. This insight encourages us to practice. For every moment we plant a wholesome seed, we are changing the flow of our life. Seeing emptiness clearly, we no longer despair in suffering, but live with calm and steadfastness, knowing that liberation is not distant, but a possibility present in every moment.
The role of the awakened in the world goes far beyond personal liberation, for their realization naturally radiates and inspires those around them. When one has clearly seen the nature of impermanence, suffering, and not self, they are no longer bound by selfishness or fear, and their peace itself becomes a guiding light for others. The awakened do not live solely for themselves, but extend their embrace to support, listen, and share. Like the Bodhisattva ideal in Mahayana, they choose to remain in the stream of life, not turning away from the world, in order to help beings cross the ocean of suffering. Their presence is like an ancient tree casting shade, where anyone who comes near feels peace. Their wisdom shows the path with clarity, and their compassion moves them to act with unconditional love. In this way, the awakened become a spiritual refuge for the community, not through dominance or power, but through genuine love and deep understanding. They awaken in others the faith that the path of liberation is not a distant ideal, but a real possibility within each person. Thus, the role of the awakened is not merely personal freedom, but a shared gift to the world, a call inviting humanity to walk the path of awakening, so that one day not just a few, but all beings may taste true freedom.